Hey y'all, today is Wednesday, April 15th, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about rhetorical analysis, which is basically us thinking about what we're going to do before we start reading speeches or listening to speeches to understand how the speaker is communicating and what their purpose is, and to help us to analyze it. So the second slide here, as you come in and get settled, whether you're in your PJs or not, be sure that if you need help, know that I'm available for email. You should have the video playing since you are listening to me. Number 2, open up a Google Doc or have a sheet of paper to take some notes. You will get to use these on a quiz tomorrow, as well as these slides. And the third, on those notes, you only have to write what I've highlighted in each slide, so that you're not writing every single thing. On this, what is one thing you remember learning about or thinking about yesterday? So think about what we discussed, which was basically communication and effectiveness, or what the word effectively meant. So think about something you thought about yesterday and write it here. You may pause this. Before you read, so before we start reading our speeches and our other small texts that we'll get to, when it comes to rhetorical analysis, there are several things you should do before you even begin reading. You should think about or analyze the speaker, so who is speaking. For example, if I were listening to a speech by Martin Luther King Jr., then I would think about, okay, who is Martin Luther King Jr.? And the context. We're going to talk more about what the context means, but that's basically, okay, what is going on in the world of the speaker? So if it were Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, what's going on in his world? What's happening as he's speaking that would influence him? The speaker and author. The speaker or author is the person who gave the speech or wrote the piece. It's important to know who the speaker is because it gives you another level of analysis. As I stated before, it just helps us to think about, who is this person? Why is he speaking? Why is it so important to him? Does he have a lot of knowledge about what he's speaking about? What is his purpose? By knowing the answers to these questions before you read, you will understand more about the piece. So before we read a speech, we want to ask the questions, who is the speaker? During what time period did the speaker live? What is the speaker known for? What does the speaker stand for? In other words, what does the speaker believe? Okay, this is a stretch break. So if you've been writing, you can stretch your hands out. Go get you something to drink. And then we just have a few more slides to take notes on. The next thing we're going to talk about is the occasion. So what is the occasion? Meaning the general political, social, or economic state of land during the time when the piece was written or delivered. So for example, Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. The occasion there was a rally that was people who were fighting for rights for African Americans. Okay, so that was the occasion. So it's important to know the context of the piece because the political, social, or economic climate most likely motivates the speaker or author to write the piece. So depending on what's going on in politics or in our world or in our economy, in our country, that motivates a speaker to speak about something with passion. By knowing the answers to these questions before we read, we will understand more about the piece that we'll be reading. When was this written or delivered? That's very important for us to think about because a lot of times things are written before our time. And so it's important for us to know how the time period influenced the writer and understand why he might mention some things. What was happening in history during this time? Were there any major movements happening during this time? And what was happening shortly before and shortly after this time period? So again, with the major movements, you could think about, we talked about Martin Luther King Jr. I Have a Dream speech. That was a movement for people were fighting for more rights for African Americans. The audience. You might not be able to identify the entire audience before you read, but it is helpful to start thinking about who the intended audience was before you read. So that's important because you want to think about who is the speaker speaking to. Think about when you talk to your parents or you talk to someone and you want them to say yes. Maybe it's your parents and you want them to let you go out or something, which you shouldn't be doing during this time. But say that was the case. You would think about your audience, your parents. You would think about, okay, what do they like to hear? How can I get them to agree with me? So knowing who the intended audience is will be helpful in determining the purpose of this speech. The last thing you need to do today is draw or type 2 things you learned in today's lesson. So you can use your notes or you can go back to your slides and you can draw or you can write. I appreciate those who did very well on yesterday's Pear Deck. Tomorrow you will have a small quiz on this week's lessons. Love y'all.